Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Julian Harris. I'm part of the security unit here in Geneva. We are three based in Geneva: Lars Tangen, Carl Juliussen, and myself. We also have staff in the field. We have 3 regional security advisors, and we have security delegates who are working in the higher risk countries that we have operations in currently. We also have, and who are a great asset to us, security focal points who are made up from local staff and usually have security as part of a number of other dossiers that they're following in their particular area of operations. We do not replace the responsibility that the heads of region and heads of mission/delegation/country offices have vis-a-vis the care and responsibility for their staff working in the field. They have ultimate responsibility. We are simply here to advise and try and move things in the right direction. In essence, what we are trying to do is we're trying to meet the needs of the vulnerable without putting yourselves and other staff working with us at risk. The first thing that needs to be clarified is who is responsible for security in the field. This will very much depend on the area of operations you're going to and whether there is an existing IFRC mission there. If there is one, then clearly they will be responsible for security. The head of delegation or the head of country office will be the person who assumes that responsibility. If you're working in a country where there is no IFRC presence, then security will lie in your hands. It will be up to your team leader or HEOPS to assume that responsibility, making sure that the planning and preparation is done correctly and appropriately. Getting to the security tools that we have, each country where the IFRC has operations already has in place minimum security requirements. In order to fulfill those criteria, those minimum criteria, the field missions must have in place already a number of plans. They need to have security regulations, they need to have a medevac plan so that we can get people out if they get sick or injured. They need to have a critical incident management plan to deal with very extreme cases, be they kidnapping or, unfortunately, death of a delegate in the field. And then we also need to have a relocation plan so that if there is a major incident, we can move teams back to an area where they will be more secure. Now, as the ERU moves into areas, for example, Haiti is a good example where we've had a number of calamities over the years. The ERU and FACT teams plug into the existing Haitian IFRC minimum security requirement plans. However, there are occasions, such as with Hurricane Matthew, where they are moving to areas where we have not actually had presence before, and they need to tweak the plans. The plans need to be consolidated and adjusted to account for the realities of that particular area, where, for example, there was no radio coverage, where transport was impossible via road. So people had to think about how we were going to move goods and people in and out via sea routes instead of via land routes. And all these things need to be done beforehand. We work with planning a great deal in security because security is about prevention. We don't want to have to deal with the consequences of issues. We want to prevent issues from happening. How can you avoid car crashes? How can you avoid kidnapping? How can you avoid riots? If you never consider these things, when they happen to you, people freeze. And individuals freeze, teams freeze, institutions freeze. And we need to avoid that. If you've considered issues and you've planned for them, you will be able to deal with them. If you haven't considered them and you haven't planned for them, you will still be able to deal with them, but at a greater cost. Personal cost, and often institutional cost, which is why it's very important that planning process takes place in a professional and systematic manner. As, for example, we've had a team recently going out in Bangladesh where we discovered that the relocation plans and the medevac plans were only based for a very small area And they were going way beyond those areas. And of course, had they not thought about updating the medevac plans, if an incident had happened, it would have taken hours, if not days, to get somebody out. Whereas now, because the planning's been done, it will be a matter of hours to get somebody out, because we know where to get the helicopter, because we know where the helicopter can land, because we know which hospital to take the people to. Without those plans in place, we're going to lose precious hours that it will take to organize that sort of stuff to get somebody to hospital for treatment, which could, of course, lead to loss of life in worst-case scenarios. And we work generally with worst-case scenarios in security. We know that you're going out there with a view of helping people, and that's absolutely what our institution is about. Right? But what we've always got to remember is also our needs. We've got to make sure that you can do your activities safely, not just about yourselves going out there, but also the local staff that you hire, your drivers, the administrative staff that you hire. We also have a duty of care towards them as well, which means that we need to make sure that they are also adequately prepared. Now, there's a number of tools that are at your disposal. There's online training in a number of languages. The Stay Safe courses exist and are at the disposal of anybody with a Red Cross, Red Crescent email address through FedNet. There are a number of guides, checklists to make sure that when you go out, you consider what all of the hazards might be. Negative consequences on the mission can be multiple, from armed attack to damage to the institutional reputation as well. And we need to be prepared for all of those things. For example, we often don't consider it, again, because we feel that as a humanitarian organization, we are privileged in the field and nobody will target us, but it's simply not true. One classic example is theft. Very simple, but absolutely devastating consequences. For example, you have an ERU working in a country where there are urgent needs, and there are always urgent needs. That ERU starts preparing all of the reporting, and we need the reporting in order to start the emergency appeals, to get the funds in order to be able to assist the people. People go out for lunch, laptops get stolen, reporting gone. And this is the sort of thing that happens and can really set a mission back. Be aware of all the possible threats that can exist. Now in the Federation, we use something called a risk register, which is a document in which you can simply list all of the threats that exist. So we look at the threats, we look at the strengths that we have, the weaknesses, and the risk that exists. Now, we also need to put in there the measures that we are going to take in order to address those threats. How are we going to reduce the possibility or probability of them happening, and how are we going to reduce the consequences of them happening? For example, we talked about laptop theft before. We could say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we back up any reports that we have so that if the laptop dies or gets stolen, we will have a backup of our reports, which is terribly important. We need to know who's going to be responsible for making these changes. We need to prioritize them, and there's little space for notes. And then there's the residual risk. What will be left? It sounds a bit technical, but the document exists or will exist on the FedNet for everybody to access. And it's actually quite a simple tool just to get ideas on paper. And the best way to do this, of course, is in collaboration with all of the staff to really brainstorm about what the risks are and how we can deal with them in the best possible way. Security is a responsibility of everybody. We really need to make sure it's not just an institutional responsibility, it's an individual responsibility. And that's something that we really want you to understand. We also want you to know that we, the security unit here in Geneva, and your regional security coordinators are available 24/7 if you have any doubts, if you have any questions vis-a-vis responsibility or vis-a-vis any instance that may be ongoing, then you can pick up the phone and call us, and we will help you as much as possible. But remember that very often we will ask you, how will you deal with the situation? Because you are on the ground, you know the realities, the contextual realities around you, and you are the ones best placed to make those decisions. On all of this, please make sure that not only you stay safe in the field, but you also keep your team members safe so we can continue doing the good work that we are doing out there in a responsible manner. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Goodbye.